The world of Fallout is filled with weird, strange, real locations that aren't that far from their real-life counterparts. They've just survived an apocalypse is all. So today, gameranx would like to show you the real-world locations from Fallout and their in-game counterparts. The Boston Custom House, at least the one that we see in Boston today and in the game world, was built in 1849 by the US federal government, but it no longer serves that purpose. Believe it or not, in the real world, it's currently being used as an 84-room timeshare resort by the Marriott Vacation Club, and has been doing so ever since 1997. The Boston Public Library McKim Building contains the library's research collection, administrative offices, and exhibition rooms. Or at least it did until the nuclear apocalypse. I mean, there's a fair amount of stuff that's still in there, I'm sure. And the fact it's still standing says something fictional. It has perhaps one of the most recognizable entrances of all time, with a couple of lions staring you down as you walk in. The reading hall also has a gorgeous coffered ceiling, and even in a charred world, still looks gorgeous. The amazing Bunker Hill Monument marks the first major battle of the American Revolution, the Battle of Bunker Hill. From this battle came the phrase, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes," and was an order given due to a lack of munitions. By conserving firepower until you knew it was useful, in theory, the chances of winning the battle went up, and we kind of all know how that revolution went. Let's just say it went better for America than dropping a bunch of nuclear bombs would. Faneuil Hall was a marketplace that was built in 1743. It's now part of a much larger marketplace and essentially functions as an indoor-outdoor mall and food eatery, along with a few other buildings in the area. It was actually one of the first of its kind in the 1970s, and many outdoor markets that you see today are based off the success of Faneuil Hall's modern use. This is one of many markers along the Freedom Trail, which passes by 16 locations that are significant to the history of the United States. These markers denote the stops that include things like the Boston Common House, Faneuil Hall, and the Paul Revere House. Now, I'm sure without thinking too hard, you can remember why Paul Revere was significant. He was that guy who went along on a horse screaming at the top of his lungs, "The British are coming." Was pretty much instrumental for all those who needed to be aware that the invasion was happening. The old Powder House in Somerville, Massachusetts, a suburb of Boston, was home to one of the first hostile acts of the Revolutionary War. You see, in the Powder House, they kept the gunpowder, and British soldiers took it, making it pretty hard to defend themselves. The Salem Witch Museum looks pretty spooky in real life, but once it was bombed to all to hell by nukes, it really took on a frightening presence. It's just weird to think about the whole Salem witch hunts from basically any context. That's what people used to do. The Massachusetts State House finished construction in 1798. And its most notable feature is its golden dome. It's actually a gilded dome on top of a state building. And through the years it has changed. They moved it to a black or gray dome at one point to prevent terror attacks, but decided that maybe gold was the best way to go. The old Boston State House was the site of the Boston Massacre, which was a heavily propagandized event used to draw some ire for the British military. This isn't to say that that ire isn't deserved. It was definitely a big rallying point for folks like Paul Revere and Sam Adams, who clearly had a bone to pick with the British military. This historic Chipotle building, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist, was once called the old Corner Bookstore, and in Fallout it looks very much like the place didn't fare too well in the explosions. Or maybe it was just the Chipotle farts. Who knows? The bombs didn't have a very good effect on the Old North Church either, which was built in 1723. It is a gorgeous old building, and is the site where Paul Revere told 3 Boston patriots to hang 2 lanterns in the steeple, as a warning to Charlestown's patriots regarding movements from the British Army. This is actually a view of the actual steeple that they did that in, and you can see why they picked it, because there was quite a view, and it could be seen for miles. I would suspect that this solution would not work nearly as good for nuclear war. They also erected a Paul Revere statue. In the real world, the area around it is a lush green park, and in the post-nuclear war world of Fallout, well, things just aren't so rosy. The MIT campus in Boston is actually one of the prettiest buildings there. It's so photo-esque, it almost doesn't look like a real building. Of course, it's not called MIT in the game, but one can imagine the types of intellectual pursuits that were being carried out when the bombs dropped. Would Boston be Boston without the Red Sox? I'm not so sure. Bethesda was smart in including a time-honored reference to one of Boston's most important pastimes, baseball. If there's anything you can say about Boston, it's that they really, really love their team. If you need indication of the great lengths taken by the Fallout 4 team to properly replicate Boston, look no further than the Samuel Bell and Robert Finley crypt marker. This is actually inside the Old North Church that we looked at earlier. The Trinity Church was built in Boston from 1872 to 1877. The church was designed by Henry Hobson Richardson and established his architectural style. Oddly enough, it became the style for a number of public buildings across the United States. Finally, who talks about Boston without talking about the harbor? Not only was Boston famous for throwing tea into the water in open rebellion, but it also housed some very famous ships, like the USS Constitution. It actually doesn't date back to colonial times, but instead the War of 1812. In 1907, the ship was designated a museum and actually sailed around the United States in hopes of educating people to the role of the Navy in both war and peace. It's an extremely old ship and one amazing piece of history that you can see in Fallout 4. The amount of research that must have gone into this game just on the location alone is massive. And while it's not a one-to-one replica, and some of the architecture and most of the locations are different, it's very impressive to look at. And there's a lot of history in Fallout 4. Leave it to a video game to make it much more interesting as well. Have you ever been to Boston? Are you interested in that kind of thing? Leave us a comment and tell us honestly what you thought. Also, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button. It helps us out immensely. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, now is a wonderful time to do so. We upload new videos every single day of the week, and the absolute best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video. We will see you next time, right here on gameranx.